We are recording this session today and will make the recording available to you as soon as we can. My name is Stacy Kernison, and with me presenting today will be Jamie Noble and Lisa Hartman. We also have several JustGrants team members in the Q&A answering your questions as they come in. Before we start, we like to review the features in Webex that will be important for you today. The meeting today includes a chat function for communicating directly with the panelists. We ask that you use the chat feature if you are experiencing technical difficulties accessing the session and need assistance. We also offer a multimedia viewer as well as a Q&A feature. The Q&A feature is designed for sessions like ours in which we anticipate there will be questions. Please make sure that you use the Q&A feature for your questions about the session content. Because Webex groups the answers with the questions, so you don't have to search through a lengthy chat log to find your answers. So again, please make sure when you want to ask a question, you put it in the Q&A chat function, not the regular chat function. We have also disabled video for our participants so that we can have more system resources available to present the content. Should you need or want live captioning, you can locate the multimedia viewer by selecting the icon with the 3 dots at the bottom right corner of your screen. Open the multimedia viewer to access the captioning. We have also muted all attendees to reduce background noise. If you cannot hear, please click the arrow to the right of the unmute button at the bottom of your screen to select another audio option. If you still are not able to make the audio work, please consider calling in by phone using the number from the meeting invite details. So before we get started, we're going to take a quick moment and do a poll. So we're going to ask everyone to answer the poll question of, does your entity have multiple DUNS numbers? So a poll will pop up here in a moment, and you're just going to select yes or no if your entity has multiple DUNS numbers. Give the system a second. There it is. So just take a moment to answer, does your entity have more than one DUNS number? Yes or no? I'm going to give it a few seconds to give everybody a chance to answer. Give it about 30 more seconds to get your answer in. So we just want to find out who has multiple DUNS numbers with their entity. So that way we can make sure we address it if we have a large group of people that do. So you get about 5 more seconds to answer. All right, so let's see our results. So about more than half, 67% do not. We have a few that do. So we have about 23% of our participants that do. So thank you for taking the time to answer that. We just want to make sure that we address that when the time comes. Next slide, please. So again, we would like to remind you that we have activated the Q&A feature to answer your questions on the subject matter today. We have several JustGrants team members monitoring the Q&A, and they will provide answers in writing as much as possible. We will also stop to answer questions verbally during the session and will select questions that may require a greater level of detail than that provided in the chat or questions that may have been asked a couple of times. As we receive and answer questions in the Q&A feature, you can use the scroll bar to go up and down in order to review them as we go through. Again, we're so glad you have joined our workshop today, and there are a number of topics we have planned for today's discussion. First, most of you are entity administrators or are involved in managing your entity in some kind of way. We will talk about what that means within JustGrants. To best work within JustGrants, you will need to have an understanding of the important role that the entity administrator has in managing your users and other aspects of your JustGrants account. We will take some time to show you some of the tasks that the entity administrator performs on a regular basis to keep your JustGrants account working properly, as well as some of the things that will need to be done in order to onboard your users in a new account. We will talk about sam.gov and how to navigate the website for assistance. And we will also point you in the direction of our library of JustGrants resources. So the purpose of today's discussion is to increase your understanding of how the entity administrator works within JustGrants. We will highlight the entity administrator role, its importance, and best practices for designating and managing this role. We will show you how the entity administrator can assign that important role to another JustGrants user if the entity administrator will be out of office temporarily or is leaving the organization. We will explain how to set up entity users, assign roles, and verify a couple of the setup processes, and we'll show you how to troubleshoot some of the most common issues for users. We will take the time to explain how your sam.gov affects your JustGrants account and what to do if the sam.gov point of contact leaves without providing the entity administrator with the sam.gov account information. We will also show you where to find help in sam.gov for JustGrants. And finally, this is a preliminary session to answer your questions, and we will take questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. We plan on spending most of this session answering your questions. So whether your JustGrants account is new or has been active for some time, the entity administrator will be called upon to add new users to JustGrants. We're going to take some time to walk through the registration process for new users and the role of the entity administrator in getting that process started. So the entity administrator is the key user management role in JustGrants and has the responsibility to manage entity information for the JustGrants account. In addition to inviting new users and assigning appropriate roles, the entity administrator should also update or coordinate changes in sam.gov as needed to maintain the accuracy of the JustGrants entity profile. Initially, the JustGrants entity administrator is the SAM eBiz point of contact, but may be delegated to another user at the discretion of the entity. So some key points for the right entity administrator: they must have knowledge of the DOJ awards, must have knowledge of the people required to access JustGrants to effectively manage the DOJ awards, have ability to respond to entity users in a timely manner, and to ensure applicants' awards can be assigned so work can be completed. Long term, this may not be the SAM eBiz point of contact, but a different person within the entity. That's why the role can be delegated in JustGrants. The entity administrator is the key user management role in JustGrants. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to delegate who that person will be. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to walk us through more details about entity management. Jamie?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jamie, and I'll be discussing entity management within sam.gov and Diamond. Hopefully most of you are entity administrators yourselves, and so if you are, there are actually two starting points from which you may have entered the grants life cycle. And that could have been that your entity previously had DOJ awards before fiscal year 2020, or for the layperson, non-government, calendar October 2019, or 2020, sorry, October 2020. And we're users in the legacy system, which was grants management system or NextGen. Secondly, you could have come to us as a new grantee or applicant when applying for DOJ funding earlier this year in 2021. And as a part of that process, your organization created an entity profile. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the maintenance. That you just learned. The entity administrator has a lot of responsibility in JustGrants when it comes to keeping their entity up to date. And let's review some of the things that you need to do in order to keep your entity management maintained. First, talk about SAM.gov. You have a responsibility as the entity administrator to work with the eBiz POC to keep the registration for SAM.gov up to date and keep all of the contacts current, including the eBiz POC. So when you first came into us, the eBiz POC is actually the default entity administrator for all entities. And it's okay to change the entity administrator that starts out as eBiz POC. It's okay for that person to delegate the responsibility of entity administrator to another individual. They do that in Diamond. But if that does happen, the entity administrator then should work very, very closely with the eBiz POC to make sure that they're keeping all of the registration in SAM.gov up to date. Next slide, please. All right, so if the SAM.gov eBiz point of contact information is correct, you would have checked your email inbox for the registration letter, and if no registration email was found, you should contact us at the justgrants.support@usdoj.gov in order for us to send you a new email for registration. If the SAM.gov eBiz point of contact information is not correct in SAM.gov and you were expecting to get a registration email for us in order to get an account in Diamond and JustGrants, make sure that you work with the person who is listed as the eBiz POC to make the changes in SAM.gov. Wait 24 hours and then request a new invitation email. If after that the eBiz POC has still not received their JustGrants enrollment email, they can request a new invitation by sending an email to justgrants.support@usdoj.gov. All right, let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting. If the entity administrator has left your organization and no one can log in or makes changes to that information, you're probably wondering how you might go about fixing that. Well, ideally, the JustGrants entity administrator will need to delegate this role to another user prior to leaving the entity within Diamond. And if the user is no longer available, you can contact the JustGrants support desk and have them invite a new entity administrator based on us reviewing the current SAM eBiz point of contact information and making sure that that would align with who we're going to send the new invitation to. Another question you might have is if the entity administrator goes out on leave for a period of time and you as a user or you have users that can't get into JustGrants, what steps can you take to address that? Well, ideally, again, the entity administrator would invite any users, assign their roles, and assign work prior to their absence so that work can still continue while they're out of the office. As an alternative, the entity administrator does have the ability to delegate the entity administrator role, as I mentioned earlier, to another user if they're going to be out for an extended period. SAM.gov allows an entity to assign an alternate eBiz point of contact. It is recommended that you assign a unique alternate instead of entering the same name for the same user or both. You don't want it. You want to have a default just in case, because we are able to invite the alternate POC if that is what is needed. If you don't have an alternate assigned, it could delay the entity moving forward in the process if that original eBiz POC is no longer available. All right. So in keeping your entity management maintenance up, you also have a responsibility within 2 other systems besides SAM.gov, and that's responsibilities in Diamond and in JustGrants. So in Diamond, that's where the entity administrator will keep users and roles current. You can add, remove, and change roles for the users that you've invited into your entity. And you can reassign the entity administrator role if you are going to be out of the office for an extended period of time or no longer need to be the entity administrator and somebody else is going to be taking that role over. You also have responsibilities in JustGrants to make sure that JustGrants shows the current entity users and can assign those users to the applications and awards within the JustGrants system. Okay, next slide. All right, you've probably heard us talk about the DUNS a couple of times. The DUNS is a unique identifier, and it's the number that's assigned to a unique legal entity based on the legal name and the doing business as name when a doing business as name is identified. Each entity has a separate JustGrants profile based on that DUNS. So as I mentioned, each DUNS has a separate JustGrants account. The DUNS number is unique for those accounts. And organizations that are using multiple DUNS, I noticed that there were 33 of you here today that have multiple DUNS associated with your entity. You will have to manage multiple JustGrants accounts. Each account must have its own users, so only a user can belong to a single entity at any given time. So each user must have a unique email address for each of those accounts. Users logging into one JustGrants account will not see awards that are managed under another JustGrants account. All right, let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting multiple DUNS. The entity administrators are able to add users to their JustGrants accounts. You just have to be sure that they register using a different email address for each DUNS that the user will represent. And then they will have to log in to each of those JustGrants accounts separately and manage the invitations that they're sending out for each of those entities. Technical support is required to invite entity administrators to JustGrants accounts after a SAM.gov update. So you'll need to contact us after if you do need to make an update in SAM.gov as far as the eBiz POC or the alternate eBiz POC is concerned. And you will also need to contact us if you need to move awards from one DUNS to another after program office speaks with you and approves this by engaging with you. All right. And now Lisa's going to talk about this.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about this. Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Hartman. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the process of JustGrants onboarding. So we have a roadmap here that can help you visualize each of the steps that are needed when you're onboarding a new user. first, the entity administrator will log into Diamond to set up each new user. A Diamond is an application that works in connection with JustGrants, and Diamond is the application that's used to add users, invite new users, and assign roles. Only the entity administrator will have access to Diamond. So you can see how it's so important that the entity administrator is available, sort of to keep all of the user information updated. The only information required to set up a new user is the first name, the last name, and their email address. And again, that email address is going to be the username for that account. So again, as Jamie said, if you have multiple DUNS numbers, you'll need to use a separate email address for each DUNS number so that there's no confusion when logging into these different accounts. The email address again becomes the username, and the user will select their own password during the registration process. Once the new user is created, the entity administrator will assign one or more roles to that user, depending on the work that user intends to do in JustGrants. So there are 6 roles, and any given user might be assigned all 6. Again, the entity administrator role can only be assigned to one person. So if one person has the entity administrator role and perhaps others, nobody else can have the entity administrator role at that time, although it can be reassigned later. New users will receive a registration email once the entity administrator has invited them to register. The user will need to open a link in the email and follow the steps to register in JustGrants, including setting up a password and multi-factor authentication. So registration is step 1. Step 2 is actually to log into JustGrants. So even though a new user is registered, they're actually not an active user in JustGrants until they've logged into the system at least once. This is a good time to test their username and password. Once the new user is registered and has logged in, the entity administrator will be able to see them in the system and will be able to assign that user to specific awards and applications. So we're going to go ahead and take, sort of a look through how we can troubleshoot. So one of the questions we see a lot is, I want to assign a user to an application or to an award, but I can't see that user in the system. Typically, the problem is that the user may have registered, but again, they didn't log in. So that's really kind of the stopping point. Once that user logs in, the entity administrator will be able to see that user in the system and will be able to assign them to awards. So if there are still issues after that user's logged in, you might want to re-invite the user through Diamond. So here's another one. I can see the user, but their roles are incorrect. What should I do? So in this case, you'd want to add or remove the roles in Diamond and refresh. And we do have, a lot of resources that will walk you step by step through this process. And we'll go through that here in just a moment, where you can find that information. And once the user has logged in and is visible in the system as an active user, and their roles are correct, they should now be fully onboarded and ready to receive assignments in specific applications or awards. Before we go into the question and answer portion of the session today, we do want to go through some resources. We have a lot of materials that you can use to self-help, to find your own answers as needed, so that you can continue working and you don't have to necessarily call our support, although they're happy to help you if you need it. Our first resource is the JustGrants website. So on the JustGrants website, we have information about JustGrants, about training, resources, support questions, frequently asked questions, news, and updates. So we're going to encourage you to take a look and become familiar with that website. We also have entity user experience training and reference materials, which provides you with information on how to navigate within JustGrants. And then we have the JustGrants user roles guide. So those 6 roles that I spoke about, we have the roles guide, and it explains exactly what each role will do. So for instance, the grant award administrator can submit a performance report, but only the financial manager can submit a federal financial report. If one person does both, they need to be assigned both those roles to have access to those tasks. So JustGrants technical support. If you've gone through the materials and you're still having trouble and you feel like JustGrants is not working like it's supposed to based on the materials, then you can call JustGrants technical support. You can send an email at justgrants.support@usdoj.gov. Now that will open a ticket automatically with our support group, and they'll follow up with you on that. If it's more time sensitive, you may want to try to call 833-872-5175. And the support desk is open between the hours of 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. And Saturday, Sunday, and federal holidays, they're open from 9 to 5. So they're available for you every day of the week. We also have a JustGrants training site. So if you go to justgrants.usdoj.gov, you'll find for every possible task that you could do, well, we have job aid reference guides. We have micro learning videos, and these are very quick videos that you should be able to look at for just a couple of minutes to help you get through something you're trying to do. We have recordings of past training sessions that you can access and get more information. We have a long list of frequently asked questions, and we also have glossary terms in case you run across a term you're not familiar with. And again, with the JustGrants training resources, they're organized by topic. So on the left, you can see that if you open the training page, you have access to entity management information, application submission, grant award acceptance, grant award modifications, performance reporting, and financial reporting. So again, that will include our job aids and videos. We also have, again, the micro-learning videos and the job aid reference guides, which are step-by-step PDF files that you can either view or print. So now I think it'd be a good time to get started on our question and answer period. And I'm going to take a look and see what kind of questions we may have so far, and see what we can say. So the first question we have is, are slides available for this presentation? And yes, there will be slides. It will be posted on the JustGrants website shortly after the session. We're going to have a follow-up email in the next few business days with additional information that's going to be sent out to registered participants. But please feel free to take a look at the JustGrants website for all of that. So the next one is the SAM.gov question. Where do I find instructions on how to set up a default eBiz POC? And again, that is a SAM.gov function. And SAM.gov is actually a completely separate program that's run by another federal agency. They have their own training available on that site, and you can go to that. And I believe if you look in the Q&A, a link was provided to that training. Let's see. Will our DUNS automatically update in JustGrants once the SAM.gov conversion to the new unique identity or entity identifier takes place, or will we have to do something to change it? So, Jeannie, I think would you be the best person to perhaps answer that question, or should I rely on someone else for that?
Do you want to go ahead and just repeat that question for me, Lisa?
Sure. Will our DUNS automatically update in JustGrants once the SAM.gov conversion to the new unique the UEI takes place? Or will we have to do something?
Yes. That is what's going to happen. Yes, we're going to facilitate that. Should we need you to take any action, we will communicate that out. But for now, the plan is for that to all happen automatically.
Thanks so much, Jeannie. Will JustGrants be migrating from DUNS to a UEI or unique entity identifier similar to other federal databases like grants.gov? And did you want to add to that, Jamie?
Sure. The answer is yes. The unique entity identifier, or UEI, is going to be the new standard.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So the next question is, should I contact my entity administrator to give me permission to draw down funds? And maybe Brenda, would you be able to sort of give some additional to that question?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. All drawdown requests are submitted through acap.gov, which is now the centralized location where all grantees go to submit drawdown requests. The roles and users that you have in JustGrants are or may be separate and distinct from the roles and users that you have in acap.gov. So when your organization initially onboarded, they received an enrollment email from both Diamond to enroll in JustGrants and another enrollment email for ASAP. The person who is in your organization that set up the ASAP account needs to then assign users as a point of contact, a head of organization, financial official, and payment requester. So if you have questions about who that is, I would say probably reach out to your entity administrator first to see if they know who the person is that's managing the ASAP account, and then go from there. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to your DOJ grant manager, who might be able to provide you with some more individualized assistance.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. So another question we have is, if my agency has a need to request a no-cost extension, how do we process that request? And I see with the answer in the chat, and if you look at the answer in the chat, there's a link to the training material that will walk you step by step through that process. But a no-cost project period extension is managed using our grant award modifications feature, and you can process the extension that way. Always best to communicate with your grant manager throughout the process, but that is the official the official request. It goes through our grant award modification. Let me see. So I'm going to refer some of these very specific questions that have to do with specific solicitations, potentially to something that's not working in the system. For instance, I'm looking at someone who's having difficulty with closeouts. I would recommend that you contact our technical support, and it looks like we're going to have somebody reach out to solve your particular problem. So here's another good question about roles is, how do you find out who is the entity administrator for an organization? So the best option for finding out who the entity administrator is in JustGrants is to navigate to the entity users menu from the home page. And that will open up a view of every user in JustGrants, and it will show their username, and it will also show the roles they've been assigned. And again, at any given time, only one person will be that entity administrator, but you can go to that list to find out who that is. And Jamie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that?
No, I think that is the absolute very best place to see who the entity administrator is. You could always start with looking in SAM.gov to see who the eBiz POC is, but as I mentioned earlier, it is totally possible that the eBiz POC, who is always the default entity administrator, may have delegated that role to somebody else. So as Lisa said, the very best place is to check in JustGrants in the member profile.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you. So, and I'm not sure necessarily who would address this, if this would be Jamie or Amy Stubbs, but one of the questions we have in the chat is, when will the UEI number be sent? I don't know if either one of you have any insight into the timing of that. I don't know if there's anyone on the line who would have any.
So this is Brenda. I was in SAM.gov earlier today and was checking an entity's registration. And underneath the DUNS number, there is already a pre-populated UEI number for some entities. So when you go into SAM.gov to check your registration, as a reminder, your SAM.gov has to be updated and renewed every year in order for you to continue to be working in JustGrants successfully. So when you log into SAM.gov to check your registration, you will be able to locate your UEI number there.
Yeah, and just to add to what Brenda was saying, it is by April of 2022 that the federal government will stop using DUNS numbers to uniquely identify entities registered in SAM. At that point, any entity doing business with the federal government will use the UEI.
Great, good changes to come. All right, thank you, ladies. So the next question is, how many persons can be assigned as administrators? And that's a terrific question. We do get that all the time. There can only be one entity administrator in JustGrants at a time. However, as Jamie mentioned earlier, you might have an entity administrator who's going to be going on leave, or maybe is taking over, a different role in your organization and is no longer going to be able to be the JustGrants administrator. That entity administrator is actually the only person who can designate the next entity administrator, whether that entity administrator is going to be in place for, a leave or for, a permanent replacement. So one entity administrator at a time. And the best course of action is that the entity administrator that's leaving makes that change prior to leaving. So that is that. And it's especially important if someone's leaving that takes place prior to, because once that entity administrator no longer has access to JustGrants, the only way that we can help you is to have you change your EBIS point of contact in SAM.gov, and then we start the process all over again of, inviting that entity administrator. So it's much less problematic if the entity administrator does their own reassignment. All right, and Jamie, I know you said some things about that. I'm not sure if there's more you want to add.
No, just that if the entity administrator does leave, really the only, and you don't have, and they haven't delegated that responsibility to anybody else in your organization, really the only recourse that you have is to look in SAM.gov to see if they're still the EBIS POC. That information will need to be updated. Hopefully there's an alternate that you are able to get in contact with, that you can contact justgrants.support@usdoj.gov to get the alternate instated as the entity administrator, and then they can either delegate that or role or to somebody else or go from there. That's why it's critically important to keep this information up to date. Really, the information in SAM.gov is the source of truth for really all of the system.
All right, great, thank you. So, Jamie, is there anything that people should know about diamonds that we haven't mentioned just yet? I mean, would you, is there more that you can tell us about diamond? Again, it doesn't only apply to entity administrators, but it's such an important piece of the JustGrants puzzle that it's worth going more in depth with it.
Yeah, so Diamond is really the access management system for JustGrants, and so every user that accesses JustGrants who is invited by the entity administrator will receive that invitation to set up their account in Diamond, which is how they would access JustGrants. Your roles will be assigned to you by your entity administrator, and there are those 6 critical roles, including the entity administrator role, that are critical for doing all of the work in JustGrants. And only your entity administrator can add or remove those roles for the individuals that are invited to participate with a role in their entity. That it is critical to keep all of the roles up to date as well. Now, I will say that if one user can have many roles. Even the entity, if you're an entity of one person, you can be the entity administrator as well as have every other role in JustGrants assigned to you as one person. But typically, our entities consist of more than one individual, and those roles are assigned to individuals that are invited to the entity.
All right, thank you for that deeper dive into Diamond's maintenance. So we have another question here. We were initially able to reassign the application submitter roles from the originally assigned submitter for that application to another staff member with that role. But when we tried to reassign that role to the originally assigned application submitter using the process outline, we received an error message stating that the original application submitter was already assigned that role. So what method should we use to reassign the application submitted as needed over the course of the application process? So this one I think I'm going to have to ask perhaps one of our support folks to potentially address. I'm not sure if that's, it seems like that's a question about the system's not working as anticipated. Is there someone from our support group that might take a look at that question?
Okay, this is Lisa Price Career. Sorry, I was double muted. If that is the case, I answered the question in the Q&A, but there's another workaround where it's a transfer feature where the entity administrator will have to navigate on the left to the application. They will have to click the application ID number. To the right under Actions, they would select Transfer. In the full window, they will put the application submitter's email in that box and hit Submit, and that should correctly do the reassignment for the application submitter. If that's not clear, you can reach out to the JustGrants support for additional guidance. But if the assignment fails during the normal process, then the other option is to use the transfer feature. But you have to click on the application ID, go to Actions, Transfer, and put in the application submitter's email, not their name.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. That's really useful information. All right, terrific. So the next question is, what role title should be used for the person who reviews all grant activity for the department? Is it the authorized representative? And I think really one of the interesting things about JustGrants is that aside from the application submitter, everyone in JustGrants has view capability for all awards and applications for all awards in the system. So if you're for instance, a grant award administrator or financial manager, but you're not assigned to a particular award, you can still open that award and view all of the information there. Again, the exception to that is the application submitter. They can only see applications. I guess the answer to that is everyone is view only unless they're the particularly assigned grant award administrator or financial manager. So you can assign any of those roles for someone who's to be assigned as the role that is able to take that action, and they're going to need to be assigned to that particular award. So I'm not sure if there's more that we want to say about that. Anybody else want to provide additional points around the view-only aspect of users that are not assigned to a particular grant? All right. Yeah, typically it might be the grant award administrator that would have probably the best view, and the administrators as well. So now the next question we have here is, what department manages Acap.gov? And so I think this one I'm going to see if we have someone online who might be able to.
I can answer that, Lisa. It's the Department of Treasury. Yeah, the Department of the Treasury manages the ASAP system. So we are leveraging that federal government payment system that's a shared service for a lot of government agencies. And so your entity will need to have an account also in ASAP. And since DOJ doesn't manage that system, but the Department of Treasury does, there are a lot of resources out there available to you from the JustGrants training site. We have a lot of resources listed there that will direct you to assistance in ASAP.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Here's a question we get fairly often. The question is, recently, when working on an application, we uploaded several documents, but we were only able to see some of those files on, and reopen them from the original screen in which we had uploaded them. We encountered the same challenge when in the Certify and Submit section. And when trying to upload the files, we could not verify them as being uploaded. We received an error message stating each of those files had been uploaded. What methods should be used to be able to verify and possibly reopen all uploaded files? So this is a great question because it impacts so many people. So one of the things that that allows JustGrants to understand the type of file that you're uploading is when you upload a file, you have to designate a category for that file, an attachment category. It's part of the upload process. So for instance, if you're uploading in your application a proposal narrative, then you want to select the category, attachment category for proposal narrative. And if you do that, JustGrants recognizes it as the proposal narrative and also will display that attachment in the proposal narrative section. So sometimes if you're in a section where you're sort of uploading other documents, unless you, like a CV, for instance, if you're uploading a CV, when you're uploading that, if you don't choose CV as the attachment category, then that application is still linked to your application. That file is still linked to your application. However, it's not visible in the CV category. So you have to kind of go looking for it. And the thing is that once you've uploaded it, even though you can't see it, JustGrants knows that it's there. And so it will not allow you to upload a second document with the same name, just in the same way that when you're trying to upload a file to a folder on your workstation, your workstation won't allow you to upload the same file again unless you override it. JustGrants doesn't have that. They just won't allow you to upload the same file, the same name file a second time. So I am not sure if we want to have additional information on that. Lisa, Price Career, I think maybe have you run across this question a lot in your daily interaction?
Yes. So thank you for that, Lisa. So you provided the at least two of the issues that come into play when it's related to attachments. The third one would be character length. So normally you get a little triangle when you're trying to upload a file and the title length of the file is too long, the system will actually let you hit the submit button. But because that triangle that is near that title name is saying that it is too long in length, you have to adjust that title or rename that title. And I believe it's 59 characters, including space. So that would be the third reason why the attachment didn't upload properly.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad I asked you about that. I had forgotten about that character length in the file name. So yeah, that is another piece of the puzzle. And again, once you get to the certify and submit section, you also have the opportunity to visually review each of the sections, and you should be able to find where those, if you scroll down and open each section, you'll be able to find where those attachments are in the system. Let me see, what else do we have? A lot of questions about the UEI number that looks like it's been answered. So here's a question: how many persons can be a grant award administrator? So this is a good question, and it actually has two answers. You can have any number of people in your organization be assigned the role grant award administrator. It benefits you to be able to do that, because the more people that are onboarded in JustGrants as grant award administrators, the more flexibility as an entity administrator you have in reassigning grant award administrators. So again, there's no real limit to the number of grant award administrators that you can have in the organization. However, each award can only have one grant award administrator assigned to it at a time. So while someone might have the role of grant award administrator in JustGrants, unless they're assigned to an award, they can't take any action on that award. But once a grant award administrator is assigned to a specific award, they can then, submit performance reports, and they can process grant award modifications, and they can sort of do all of the, tasks that a grant award administrator can do. But again, only one person at a time can be assigned to the award. Let's see. Does anybody else want to add on to that? All right. Here's someone who says, I used to be able to check our SAM expiration date in SAM.gov by simply entering our DUNS number, but now a login and registration is required. Is there a way to access and download this information without a login? And while I'm not a SAM.gov expert, my understanding is that you have to have a SAM.gov account with a login and password in order to gain access to your account for security reasons. But I'd like to defer to possibly Janie to see, or Brenda, to see if there's more to this answer.
Ooh, I'm going to defer to Brenda because I'm not sure about that in SAM.gov.
Yeah, so SAM.gov recently updated their website and their login information. So anytime that you want to view an entity's registration, you must have a login. So it's no longer publicly available like it used to be about maybe 3 months ago. So you have to create an account, and SAM.gov uses login.gov as the as like a two-factor authentication, I guess, security requirement, since it does impact an entity or an organization's ability to receive any federal funds from the federal government, and as well as list, any exclusions that might happen to an entity, whether it's a person that's on the entity or the entity itself. So short answer is you have to create an account in SAM.gov using login.gov to view an entity registration.
All right, thanks, Brenda. All right, well, here's a question about canceled applications. Why is a canceled application still listed under my application? And really, the answer to that is that essentially we keep the canceled applications in JustGrants for retention purposes, and sort of just as this is sort of a record for you to refer to if you need to, but also there are a number of different reasons why an application might be canceled, and so depending on why you did cancel the application, you may want to go back and have that for a record. They could be canceled because the application passed its deadline, or it could be canceled because it's a duplicate application that was a mistake, or there are any other number. There are a number of other reasons why an application can be canceled. So you'll see the status, the cancellation status as to why it was canceled, and that may be useful, but they don't disappear from the system. Let's see. So another question here is I'm going to actually ask perhaps Brenda to maybe start the answer to this question, and maybe Amy Callahan could weigh in on this question as well. But I find the system confusing. I'm the grants compliance officer, and I need to see that the actions have been taken by the proper deadlines and by the right people. Is there a role that I should have to be able to review that? So maybe Brenda or Amy, do you have thoughts about this question?
I'm sorry, I was having difficulty hearing you, Lisa. They want to be able to see when items are due. Is that correct?
Yeah, the question is, I need to see the actions have been taken by the proper deadlines and by the right people. So is there a role that I should have to be able to review that?
This is Brenda. I think this sounds sort of like a read-only, sort of role that doesn't quite exist in the system. My understanding, and I don't know, Amy, if you're gonna hop in, maybe having an alternate grant award administrator role that would give you the ability to view the application, or I'm sorry, the award information for the entity.
I mean, that may work, I would think. I think also potentially the authorized representative role and or the entity administrator role has more,
certainly entity administrator.
Has the ability to view more information. I mean, if you are the entity administrator role, though, you will also have to be assigning different users to the applications or to the awards. So there will be an additional functionality that you would need to do. But I think that those roles have the most information and have the ability to read the most information for the applications across the entity.
All right, thank you. It sounds like there are a number of options to that, but thank you for those answers. Here's a question: if I upload entity documents in the JustGrants, for example, an F&A rate agreement, the financial questionnaire, will application submitters be able to access that to add to an application? And the answer to that is yes. That's precisely why that whole entity documents section was designed. It's designed so that you can have the most updated version of any particular document that might be shared between applications and awards. And so, yes, that is a wonderful place to store those documents. It's a system that's designed to prevent the possibility of having multiple versions of a document on different workstations and different information being uploaded. So yes, the entity administrator is the person that manages the upload of those documents. But yeah, so application submitters for all applications, grant managers, all of these people will be able to access that and upload the information into your task. So here's a question about the application, and this is one I know that we have talked about in previous sessions. So, and it's an important question, is there a way to print the whole application to include all individual years of the budget and the summary? And Amy, I'm going to let you, it looks like you've got some sort of qualifiers on this. I'm going to let you answer this question about printing the whole application. Would you be able to do that?
Sure. So printing the whole application, I mean, we obviously want to be able to print when you click the print button and be able to print everything. You won't be able to print the attachments with that print button. So you're still going to have to be able to go in and make sure you have a copy of all of the attachments that you add to the application. And there is a current bug in the system regarding the inability to print all of the different years under a budget. So there's a few different workarounds that you can do. The easiest workaround though would be to take a screenshot of the different years prior to submitting your application and then saving that. But we are definitely trying to work toward being able to print out the full budget and all of the years within the budget with the print button that you guys see in the application submission phase and in JustGrants when you're reviewing your applications.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that's a question that a lot of people have about printing, so thank you for that. Here's a question regarding, so this is again following on to the earlier question about uploading files. And they said we did assign a category to each document uploaded and kept the title within the 600 character limit. If we have a problem again, we'll do screen captures and reach out to the help support desk, and that is absolutely the right option. If if Grant is not it's not doing what you expect it to do, and not doing what the steps in the training documents are telling you to do, then absolutely the help and support desk is the best place to go. As much information as you can give them to help solve your problem, the steps and the screenshots go a long way to understanding, what you're seeing and kind of get an idea of how to solve the problem. Any other information you might provide, like your DUNS number, the application number, that sort of thing as well would be very, very useful to the support desk. So maybe Lisa or would you, I don't know if you'd like to, since I know that you, Sherry, maybe would you, either one of you have additional information you'd like to see?
I would just add, and I using the word assign, it should, the category should be defaulted to the appropriate category. So do not, in most cases, do not change it. Let the category default to the area that you're in the application, and then just upload your file. But if like you stated that is not rendering the attachment uploading properly, then reach out to the support team, the JustGrants support team.
Thank you. Here's another question about roles regarding applications. In our organization, the person preparing the DOJ application would not be the application submitter. What process and role should the grant preparer be assigned? So that's a terrific question. Anyone that needs to have any input on an application must be assigned the application submitter role, whether or not that's really sort of their title in your organization. For JustGrants, it's the application submitter role that allows a person to make any changes whatsoever. So if one person is going to be sort of entering, the data into an application, and another person is going to be certifying and submitting, that's fine. That all works out great. Only one person can be the application submitter in an application at a time. So, you know, once the person entering the bulk of the information is ready for it to be submitted, then the entity administrator will need to reassign that application submitter role to the application prior to that second person submitting it. So the application submitter role can be reassigned just like the entity administrator role can be reassigned. Only one application submitter in at a time, but anybody touching it should be assigned that role. Here's another question. When assigning roles, what system should you start with? And the answer to that is Diamond. Only the entity administrator can access Diamond, and only the entity administrator can assign roles. And we do have a great deal of training information on how to reassign those roles. It's a very straightforward process. Reassigning roles takes less than a minute, and it takes place immediately. So it's not like something you'll have to wait 24 hours to manage, but it's entity administrator in Diamond. Let's see. Brenda, I'm going to ask this one of you. If we have multiple DUNS numbers, do we have to have multiple UEI numbers?
Yeah, so I was actually just on SAM's website checking this out, and I'm going to include a link to their UEI FAQ. So essentially the short answer is if you have an active SAM registration for a DUNS number, the system will automatically generate a UEI for that active DUNS number that's in the SAM, that has an active SAM registration. I cannot say what happens beyond that. I know that if your organization does not need to utilize multiple DUNS numbers, then, it might be best to consolidate that in some way. But I'll include the link to the UEI FAQ over on SAM.gov and GSA's website, since those are the entities that are managing that. So short answer is yes, it will be you will automatically get a UEI assigned to every DUNS number that has an active SAM registration.
That's great, thank you. Here's another question. Where can we submit questions when the JustGrants reps can't answer a question? And that's a very good question, and I'm glad that you brought this up. So if you have a technical issue with JustGrants, for instance, you press a button and you expect it to act one way and it doesn't act that way, or you can't find an attachment, or something is happening that the system's not working, our technical support desk can help you with that. If you have a question that's more of a programmatic question, like, what kind of document do I need to upload to satisfy, my the award requirements, or how do I go about, requesting, a change to things. Those are really questions that would be more directed to your grant manager. So your grant manager will be the person that can help you with the why and the with the why questions and more specific information about your particular award, and technical support would be the why can't I do this kind of a question. So I know we have a number of people online. Would somebody like to give a longer or more nuanced answer to that?
Yes, and specifically because we have 3 managing components in JustGrants. For the programmatic questions, I actually would follow the solicitation, and it states who to contact for non-technical questions. For OVW, they have a contact. For COPS, it's their COPS Response Center, and then OJP has a response center. So I would follow the guidance in the solicitation, and that information can be found under the contact information of who to address programmatic questions. And it's possible that they might have to reach out to your grant manager to get some clarity on your question, but you can start with the solicitation.
All right, thank you. All right. So that was a good question. So if the person preparing an application is separate from the application submitter, what's the best way to manage this process and roles? And we've answered this a little bit previously, but there's a little bit more of this question that I wanted to take a look at. Should the entity administrator assign the application submitter role to the individual preparing the document, and then when done being prepared, the entity administrator reassign the application submitter role for that application to the person who will be reviewing, approving, and submitting? Or does this involve the transfer feature we talked about earlier? So the answer to this question is the reassignment that was discussed in the bulk of that question is the way to go. The transfer feature, right now, we're using that if for some unknown reason the reassignment feature does not work, then the transfer feature is a workaround. But all applications and awards, if you're moving the task from one person to another, you should use the reassign option. So the answer to the first part of that question is yes, you want to reassign. Transfer feature only if the reassign didn't work. Let's see. So as an entity administrator, I may end up assigning myself other roles. Is that correct? And the answer is yes. You can hold as many roles as necessary. The answer to that is yes. Here's another question. Can there be two authorized representative roles? Legally, our AR must be our top official, but he does not log into the system, and someone else needs to fulfill this function under his role. So this is a question that is determined in part by the program offices that Lisa was just discussing. We have 3 program offices in the Department of Justice. One of them, the Community-Oriented Policing Services Department, actually does require 2 authorized representatives. OVW, the Office of Violence Against Women, and the Office of Justice Programs are limited to 1 authorized representative. So the system will not allow you to have a second in those program offices. So the person that is the designated authorized representative can be determined by your organization. However, it must be someone who can legally enter into a contractual agreement with the Department of Justice. So it should not necessarily be, that should be taken into account. So the authorized representative is a legally identifiable role. Let's see. It seems you're aware of many challenges within the system and workarounds for them. Would it be possible for all grantees to get that workaround list? I'm not sure who would be the best person to ask this question.
I will make an attempt. So we do not have a workaround list that could start there. It's just that if we encounter an issue where the system is not performing as intended, I mean, the technical team, the developers work to do their best to resolve the issue, or sometimes there is a workaround, but in many cases, the workaround is temporary until the system is up and running and performing as intended. So it would not be in our best interest to share if we had a list that we don't have, because we don't deem a workaround is permanent. We're continuing to work on the system to get it to the point where that we do not have any issues with you performing the task as the system intended for you to do.
Yeah, and this is Jamie, just to piggyback off of what Lisa was saying. I think some of the questions here that I heard asked where, we were trying to, I guess, tailor the answer to the question specific to the case that was raised, which there are, several nuanced cases that I think need to be dealt with on a case by case, just to get you the best answer to kind of fit the nuance for your situation. But as Lisa mentioned, yeah, any workarounds, quote unquote, are temporary. And I know that, over the course of the past year, if there were any major communications that needed to be issued, to attempt to combat any, anything in the system that we needed to, we did send out those communications or extend a deadline or something like that.
Thank you. All right, so we have this question here. We have a grant that was accepted previously, but a glitch in the system made it pending again. We have had our authorized representative work with our IT and work with the help desk. We still haven't been able to accept it. Do you have any tips? Maybe Lisa or Sherry, I don't know if you have any tips to move forward on this.
This is Lisa.
Go ahead,
Sherry.
So
Go ahead, Sherry.
the question was posed by Riley, and Riley, I did look up your name in the system, and I have the information, and I'll reach out and contact you.
Great, thank you. That is the end of the questions that we have in our Q&A section. I have not had a chance to look through the chat to see if there's anything in here. Maybe Karen or Stacy, do you have any questions in the chat that should be addressed?
It doesn't look like we have anything.
Hi, Lisa.
It doesn't look like we have anything at this time. So I think we may be okay.
At this time,
where we are. I think we may be okay, but where we are.
All right, thank you for checking. I appreciate it. So in the absence of any further questions, I'd like to see if perhaps we could, reach out to Jamie to see if you have any sort of closing remarks for the session today. Is there anything you'd like to talk to us about?
I had wanted to, I don't have the share capability, but I would just once again want to impress upon the audience the importance of the entity administrator for managing the entity across, as we've shared with you today, across 3 systems that are critical to the inner workings of your grant management, and that's SAM.gov. As I mentioned, just to recap for everybody, that the default entity administrator for every entity is that eBiz POC. And that is the starting point for all entity administrators. Now, after that, the entity administrator or the eBiz POC can delegate that role to somebody else should they want to do that. And that, after that happens, it is critical that the entity administrator remain in close contact with the eBiz POC to make sure that the information that is maintained in SAM.gov is always kept current. Any changes need to be made there because SAM.gov is the source of truth, not only for JustGrants, but for grants.gov and several other federal systems. After that, the entity administrator really acts as the gatekeeper, if you will, to, it looks like I can share, so I might be able to share the content that I wanted to. So instead of just hearing me talk, let's see here. Yes. Let's see here. There we go. The entity administrator is really the gatekeeper for entity users. Any user that is going to do work in the JustGrants system. You as the entity administrator have the responsibility and the ability in Diamond to invite members to be part of your organization. You're going to select the roles to assign or remove as appropriate for each of those members. You have the authority and the ability to reinvite and remove members from your entity as you see fit in working with that. And you also have the authority and the responsibility to replace yourself as the entity administrator if you're going to be on leave for a significant amount of time, or if you're leaving the organization. So that's really, really important to keep in mind. And when you're assigning individuals to specific roles in JustGrants, you should keep in mind two major things. What actions will those users need to take in JustGrants on behalf of your entity? And then what roles would enable those users to take the actions that they will need to take? And I just wanted to share with you that there are 6 foundational roles created to ensure that entity users have the authority and ability to carry out specific requirements and tasks within the JustGrants system. And so the first one is you, the entity administrator, confirming information contained in the entity profile is correct and current in JustGrants. You will manage the entity users, including user role assignments in Diamond, and then specific application and award level assignments in JustGrants. And as I mentioned, the default is that eBiz POC, but that can be delegated certainly. And then, there are 5 other roles that are very important as well. That application submitter role, the authorized representative, which, as Lisa mentioned, must possess the legal authority and able to enter into a legal agreement that will bind the entity to the award terms and conditions. A lot of legalese. And then we have the grant award administrator, and that's the person who submits the programmatic related award requirements, including all of the performance reports, the GAMs, and portions of the closeout. There's also an alternate grant award administrator, and they provide support to the main grant award administrator, and they can initiate but not submit those important programmatic related award requirements, including the GAMs. There's also the role of the financial manager. This person will certify and submit financial information for all federal financial reports on behalf of your entity. And as I stated before, multiple roles can be assigned to a single user. So if you're an entity of, fewer than 6 people, those roles can be assigned to as few as 1 person. So even if you're an entity of 1, you can have all 6 of these roles. So there's no restrictions there. And that's really all I wanted to mention. It's just, you play a really critical role across keeping all of the information up to date and current within 3 of those systems.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for that information. We really appreciate it. So we are just about at the end of our session today, and unless we have, I guess we don't have any further questions in our Q&A. So we'd like to take this moment to thank you so much for joining us. We have really appreciated your questions and your attention today, and we hope you have a terrific rest of your Tuesday. So thank you very much.
Lisa, would you mind explaining the evaluation at the end? There will be a survey.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's important. When you log out, you'll get a 4 or 5 question evaluation at the end. And please, if you would, just take a few moments to fill it out. It provides us with a lot of information on how we can continue to present quality sessions to you, and what it lets us know what you appreciate and what you'd like to see otherwise. So please take time to fill out the evaluation.